Welcome to a place where true love isn't just remembered, it's felt. Here, stories unfold not in fairy tale castles, but in quiet kitchens, midnight whispers, and unexpected glances that change everything. These aren't just love stories, they're awakenings, moments where a woman, long unseen, is finally looked at like she's the only one in the room, where late night coffee becomes emotional closeness, and a gentle touch speaks louder than words. It's where connection defies age and passion isn't about impulse, but reverence. Every story you'll hear is raw, real, and deeply human. If you've ever loved deeply, longed silently, or found yourself in someone else's eyes when you least expected it, this space is for you. Subscribe, stay close, and let your heart remember what it means to feel everything again. Because here, it's not just desire, it's love reborn. He saw me when no one else did. It's hard to explain how you can go from being seen every day to feeling completely invisible. But it happens slowly, like a soft dimming of the lights. 1 year you're celebrated, needed, noticed, and then, little by little, life shifts. Your name stops being spoken with softness. Your body becomes more functional than beautiful. Your presence, once vibrant, becomes background noise. People didn't mean to forget me. It wasn't cruel. It was just life. A mother's love is expected, and a woman's desires are often tucked away once she's given herself to others long enough. I became the dependable one, the strong one, the quiet one who listened, who served, who filled the room without ever really being in it. It wasn't until he started showing up that I realized just how long I'd been gone. He was younger, yes, but it wasn't about that. It wasn't about age or rules or the lines people draw when they've never felt what we felt. It was about the way his eyes landed on me, like I was light, not shadow. Like I wasn't just the mother of his friend, not just someone whose life had settled into routines and responsibilities, but someone whose story was still unfolding, someone still worthy of curiosity, of closeness. Of love, it started in small moments, glances across the kitchen while they played music too loud in the living room, a joke he tossed my way that lingered a little longer than it should have, a smile that didn't rush to look away. At first, I thought I was imagining it. I told myself he's just being kind, but deep down, I felt something flicker in me, something I hadn't felt in years. A quiet hum, a blush under the surface. He never stared. It wasn't crude or careless, it was reverent. His gaze never made me feel cheap, it made me feel seen, truly seen, and when our eyes met, something passed between us, something warm. Something that made me remember what it felt like to be wanted not for what I could do for someone, but simply for who I was. I'd forgotten how that felt. It wasn't long before we found ourselves alone in the same space more often. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was something neither of us wanted to name. But every conversation dug a little deeper. He asked questions no one asked me anymore, about my favorite books, about my childhood dreams, about what kept me awake at night. He listened like he wanted to know every part of me, not just the woman I'd become, but the girl I used to be, the girl who loved to dance barefoot, the girl who believed in magic. I was terrified at first. Every time he stayed a little too long after dinner, every time our hands brushed when passing a plate, I told myself this was dangerous, reckless, unthinkable, but I couldn't deny the way my heart beat differently when he was near. Not just faster, but fuller. I felt present, awake, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel hollow when I looked in the mirror. He complimented me once, softly, casually, while standing in the doorway. "You look beautiful tonight," he said. Just that, no teasing, no sarcasm, just truth. My breath caught, not because no one had said it before, but because no one had meant it the way he did. His voice didn't try to impress, it tried to offer. And in that offering, I felt something stir deep in me, something sacred and forgotten. I didn't know what to do with the way I started to long for his voice at the end of the day, or the way I'd glance at the clock, wondering if he'd stop by. It scared me. how natural it felt to want someone again, how deeply I wanted to be wanted, not out of habit, but out of choice, out of fascination, out of love. He never crossed a line, but his presence crossed into my spirit in a way I couldn't ignore. I started noticing details about myself I'd pushed aside: the curve of my waist, the warmth in my laugh, the softness in my eyes. I caught myself humming in the kitchen, smiling without a reason, feeling color return to a world I'd forgotten had any. It wasn't just about being desired, it was about being remembered, and he remembered me, not for who I had been in someone else's life, but for who I still was beneath all the years and silence. I don't know the exact moment the shift happened. Maybe it was in the way he looked at me when I walked into the room, like I was sunlight he'd been waiting for. Maybe it was the way he never rushed to fill silences, letting them stretch long enough for honesty to rise. Or maybe it was simply the way he made me feel like I was still becoming, still worthy of a beginning, not just an ending. But I do know this: he saw me, and when someone truly sees you, there is no going back to being invisible. That was the beginning. His presence awakened something I'd buried. It wasn't planned, not even close. Nothing about what unfolded came from intention. If anything, it came from the quiet spaces of loneliness that most people don't see. The kind you learn to carry with a smile, the kind you tuck under routines and folded laundry and empty chairs. That ache had become familiar, almost comfortable, like a wound that stopped bleeding but never healed. And then, somehow, he walked into that silence with nothing more than kindness and attention, and everything began to stir again. It started with small things. A coffee cup placed beside mine with a gentle, almost shy grin. A casual comment about the way I hum while cleaning up. Laughter at jokes I'd long stopped sharing because no one ever listened closely enough to catch them. He noticed things, little things, that no one else did, and in that noticing, something inside me woke up. It didn't rush. It unfurled slowly, like spring after a long, unforgiving winter. Most nights after she went to bed, I would stay up, doing dishes or reading the same paragraph in a book over and over, not really absorbing the words. He started staying too, just sitting, talking. Sometimes it was nothing: music, movies, the strange ways the world had changed. But other times it dipped deeper. He asked questions no one asked, not out of politeness, but because he truly wanted to know. Questions about who I was before I was a mother, what I dreamed of before I stopped dreaming, what kind of music made me cry, what I believed in when I was younger. I remember one night in particular. The house was quiet, and we were sitting just across from each other on the living room floor, our backs resting against the couch. The lights were dim, and he was telling me about a moment from his childhood, something tender, something that had clearly shaped him. His voice dropped when he spoke, slow and unguarded. I listened, but more than that, I felt. I felt the way his voice found me, the way it reached places I hadn't let anyone touch in years. Then he said my name. Just my name, like it was something worth holding gently. I hadn't heard it like that in a long time, not wrapped in a command, not tossed into a hallway out of habit, but spoken like it mattered. I looked at him, and he looked back with a softness that disarmed me. There was no pressure in it, just presence, just the quiet power of being looked at, as if I wasn't just someone getting through life, but someone worth slowing down for. That night, something in me cracked open. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was subtle, like a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding finally letting go. I felt the ache, not just a desire for touch, but for closeness, for nearness, for someone to reach in and remind me that I was still in there, that I still had something beautiful to give, and something even more beautiful to receive. Over time, I found myself lingering when he spoke, leaning closer without meaning to. Our talks grew longer. Sometimes the space between our shoulders would close just slightly. I'd feel the heat of him near me, and it wasn't about lust, it was about gravity, a slow, undeniable pull that made me feel alive in the most startling, honest way. Like my body remembered what it was like to be wanted, and more than that, to want. There were nights when his laughter echoed down the hall long after everyone else was asleep, and when I heard it, something inside me smiled. There were days when I found excuses to stay in the room just a little longer, when I brushed past him and felt that quiet jolt, like every nerve in my body had leaned in to listen. He awakened something I hadn't dared to touch in years, my own longing. Not for anything specific, just for warmth, for being seen, felt, cherished, for being known in a way that had nothing to do with age or titles or roles. I began to remember myself, not as I had been defined by others, but as I used to be before I gave every part of myself away. I remembered the woman who once danced in the kitchen at midnight, the one who laughed loudly, the one who dreamed of being swept up in something unexpected and wild. He didn't give that version of me to me. He just reminded me that she had never really left. She had only gone quiet. I would sometimes find him watching me in ways that didn't make me self-conscious, but made me feel treasured. As if I held stories he was eager to read slowly, word by word. And though nothing had passed between us that could be named or claimed, the energy was undeniable, not heavy, not inappropriate, just deeply human, deeply alive. He never forced the moment. He never even asked for more. But his presence alone was enough to stir the sleeping parts of me, and I let them stir. For once, I didn't shut them down. I let the warmth spread. I let the ache live. It wasn't a chase. It wasn't a scandal. It was a quiet unfolding, an awakening, something soft and sacred and real, and it changed everything. Our connection wasn't planned, but it was real. I never searched for it. If anything, I ran from even the thought of it at first. It felt impossible, forbidden, foolish, and yet there it was, growing quietly without permission. There was never a moment I sat down and thought, I want him. It wasn't about wanting. It was about feeling something too deep to name. Something that moved beneath the surface of every glance, every silence we shared, every breath we didn't realize we were holding. It started like gravity, slow and invisible, but undeniable. Every time he was near, the air shifted. I'd tell myself to keep it distant, keep it normal, but there was nothing ordinary about the way he made me feel. He never crossed lines, but he moved through me like music, like warmth, like light. And the closer we became, the more I understood that connection like this doesn't come often. Maybe once in a lifetime, if you're lucky. What drew me in wasn't youth or novelty. It wasn't rebellion or loneliness. It was the way he made space for all of me. He listened like my voice mattered. He looked at me like my story had weight. He never treated me like I had already lived my best years. He made me feel like there was still more ahead, more to uncover, more to feel. He touched me first with words, with the kind of conversations that peel away your armor before you even notice. Then it was in the way he stood closer each time, like his body was learning the shape of mine without touching it. And then it happened. It wasn't planned. It wasn't even something we spoke about. It was a moment that rose out of the space between us, full and quiet and inevitable. He reached for my hand, barely brushing his fingers against mine, and everything inside me stilled. It wasn't lust, it wasn't need, it was deeper, like recognition, like two pieces finally realizing they belonged together, even if the world would say they didn't fit. The first time he touched me, truly touched me, there was no rush, no pulling, no noise, just a stillness so loud I could feel my heart answering his without a word. He didn't come at me with hunger. He came with reverence, with care, like I was something sacred, not something he wanted to take, but something he longed to understand. Every move was slow, searching, asking without speaking, and I answered him, because I had been waiting, not for him specifically, but for someone who would reach me like that, someone who wouldn't just want to feel my skin but feel my soul. He did. He touched me like he was reading a language only I could speak, and I let him. It's strange, the way love surprises you when you've stopped expecting it. I had wrapped myself in layers for so long, layers of responsibility, of caution, of guilt. But with him, those layers didn't fall off all at once. They softened, they unfolded, like petals, not armor. And with every moment he gave me his full presence. I gave him a piece of myself I didn't know was still alive. What we shared was never about recklessness, it was about truth. I saw it in his eyes when he looked at me like I was more than just desirable. I was cherished. He didn't rush to take anything, he waited. He watched, he asked, and when the time came, when I let him in fully, it wasn't fire, it was warmth. It was deep, grounded, devoted. He held me in a way that didn't ask for more, just held, and that night I cried, not because I was ashamed or afraid, but because I felt safe. I felt remembered. Every inch of me felt known, not just my body, but the history beneath it, the stories in my skin, the silence in my breath. He loved all of it. I gave him my heart before I even realized I had. It wasn't wrapped in expectation. It wasn't a gift I meant to offer. It just happened. I looked at him one evening, and something inside me whispered, he sees me. He chooses me still, and that was everything. Love like that isn't born out of impulse. It's born out of depth. It grows in the cracks where pain used to live. It doesn't scream, it whispers, and when it finally arrives, you don't need to ask why. You just know. You know because when he holds your face in the quiet dark, it feels like the world has stopped rushing for the first time in years. You know because you're not thinking about tomorrow. You're finally living in the moment that's holding you right now. I never imagined giving my heart to someone like him. I never imagined him reaching for it so gently, but he did, and I let him take it because our connection wasn't a mistake. It was real. It was love, not just desire. I used to believe that desire was something that faded with time, that after a certain point, the heat softens, the pull weakens, and what remains is comfort. Safe, predictable, quiet. I told myself that was enough, that it had to be, but then he came along, and everything I believed about love and longing was rewritten without warning. What started as a whisper between glances became something undeniable, a slow burn that crept beneath my skin and settled in my chest. There was temptation, yes. How could there not be? His presence stirred things I thought I had buried. His voice made me pause, his nearness made my breath catch, and the way he looked at me, it made my heart remember its own rhythm. But what grew between us wasn't just want. It wasn't just a reckless yearning for something forbidden. It was care, deep and unshakable. It was tenderness. It was the kind of love that doesn't ask for anything but your truth. The first time he held me, he didn't rush. His arms wrapped around me like he was afraid I might break, and maybe in some ways I already had. Maybe he knew that. Maybe that's why he was so careful. Every touch was deliberate, not to possess, but to assure me I was safe. Safe to feel again, safe to be vulnerable, safe to be loved the way I always needed to be. He kissed me like I was fire, not something to tame, but something to honor, something to stand close to, knowing it could change him. And it did. It changed us both. There were moments lying there beside him where time felt suspended, where the world outside the room ceased to matter, no roles, no responsibilities, just warmth and breathing and stillness. I would look into his eyes and see something that wasn't fleeting or naive. I saw recognition, the kind that says, I see you, all of you, and I'm not leaving. He loved me in a way that wasn't loud, but it echoed. It stayed with me when he was gone. It lived in the silence between texts, in the scent he left on my skin, in the way I caught myself smiling when I remembered something he said. And when he touched me, it wasn't just skin to skin, it was soul to soul. There's no other way to describe it. It was full, honest, completely consuming. What surprised me most was how natural it felt, how unforced, how right. I thought I'd feel guilt. I thought I'd carry the weight of judgment, of what ifs and what will they thinks. But all I felt in his arms was peace, the kind of peace that only comes when you stop running from yourself, when you let go of who the world says you should be and finally become who you really are. He didn't just make me feel beautiful. He made me feel known, cherished, desired in a way that wasn't about youth or perfection or fantasy. He desired the real me, the tired me, the soft, scarred, complicated me. And in doing that, he gave me a kind of freedom I hadn't felt in decades. We didn't need to define it. We didn't need to explain it. Love like that doesn't beg to be understood. It simply is. It arrives quietly, takes root, and grows wild. And you can either fight it or you can surrender to it. I surrendered. I let go of the fear, the shame, the doubt. I let go of the voice in my head that said this wasn't meant to last, because even if it didn't, even if it burned out tomorrow, what we had was real. And for once, that was enough. To be chosen like that, to be touched not just with hands, but with reverence, to be held like something precious and kissed like something powerful. He never made me feel like a secret. He made me feel like a miracle, like maybe love isn't about timelines or logic or age, it's about connection. And ours was deeper than anything I'd ever known, deeper than words, deeper than skin. It was the kind of love that settles into your bones and stays there. We didn't make promises. We didn't paint the future in unrealistic colors, but we did something far braver. We showed up. We opened. We loved fully and without apology. What bloomed between us may have begun as temptation, but it quickly became something sacred. It was love in its truest form, not just a spark, but a fire that warmed every part of me that had been cold for too long.